Hi. I'm very honored to have the privilege of introducing Françoise Davoine, whose work most of you are probably familiar with. She may be one of the people whose work is most important to sort of have in mind in our arsenal of good intentions as we try to work with people who are struggling against really difficult odds. I think most of you probably know her book that she wrote with her husband, Jean-Max Gaudelier, History Beyond Trauma, which is an incredible text and incredibly useful to have in this kind of work. So without further ado, I'll introduce Françoise.
Thank you. I think I come after Martin Cosgrove, who says something very important. To connect, sometimes it's important not to connect, to sit, and not to try to intrude. That's what I learned when I was working in mental hospital. I started to be a psychoanalyst. I trained in a public psychiatric hospital without being a medical doctor nor a psychologist. I came from literature, classic literature, and sociology. And we persuaded, Jean-Max and I, we wanted to go to work, to start to train as analysts, although we were in the Lacanian school, but we thought the training was not there. Theory was there, but not the training. The training was to meet people. And for some reason, we thought the best way was to go to a mental hospital where everybody comes without paying in France. It's social security. And we met by chance a medical doctor who was a Lacanian too, who was the medical director of a ward in a psychiatric hospital in the north of France. And we met him in a conference like that, and we say, oh, we would like to, and he said, okay, come tomorrow at 5 o'clock in the morning. And at 5 o'clock in the morning, he would take his car. There was no train to go over there. It was really far away. And we went. And I had no clue why that urge to go to work with, not with psychoanalytical patients, but with mad people in a regular hospital. I had no clue. Second, while we were driving, on the sides, it was the north of France where we were going, on both sides of the road, there were cemeteries, war cemeteries, miles and miles of war cemeteries. I did not see them. Of course, I saw them, but I thought, well, that's normal, you know, there were wars, there are cemeteries, and that's normal, banal. But that was the journey which started. And you asked me, why do you do this job? Okay? That is something that all patients I met there asked me. Why do you do this job? Who are you to come here? Who are you to be interested by us? Because nobody was interested by them until then. There were some Lacanians who would come, I was Lacanian, okay, who would come and give lectures, but don't talk with the patients. And I will tell you very quickly what happened. One day those people at that time, it was exactly 72. Those people who were there like, you say, chronic patients. They stay. It was before the desinstitutionalization. They stayed a long time. They all talk about the war, because we were on those grounds. Okay, the war, it was all the battlefields since the 19th century and before were there. And one day I was, but they didn't talk about the war like a cause of their disease, of their psychosis, or no, madness. They didn't, they just, mentioned it here and there. And one day I was talking with some, that's like Martin said, I always worked in the common room, never in an office. In the common room, I would sit beside the patient and we would eventually talk. But this gave the other the idea we could talk. So some would come, and little by little some interference or action would start. This man was having a pipe. He was smoking a pipe. And he was telling me how he received ECT in Paris. He had been brought to Paris and he had received ECT. At that moment, 72, ECT were rare. It was considered as an archaic method. It was used in some clinics, private clinics usually, not so much in public hospitals. In private clinics, even in a Lacanian private clinic, they did ECT at that time, because one of the patients escaped to see me. But then it was not like now. And this man talked, I understood he had become crazy after the war when he used to take his horse and take them, the tractors, because they were new mechanics. And he couldn't fit with that. He could take the tractors, go round and round like the horses when they have their gas, and so on. He was telling me about farm life at that moment. The night after, when I come back to Paris, I dream my grandfather, who smoked a pipe like him and who looked like him. And I was stunned. All that journey was to meet my grandfather, who was a stretcher bearer during First World War, on those grounds, on all the battlefields of First World War, where he came back silent. I loved him, and I think I became a psychoanalyst through this silence. I was exploring the battlefields and the madness of that war, and the madness. At that moment, we did not speak of trauma in 72 so much. So I was, I was saying that madness or psychosis is a research of exploration, the catastrophic zones in our history. Catastrophic zones which may be at a little scale of a family, the loss of a child, or something very domestic, you would say, and the big zones of catastrophes. That is something I prefer to trauma, to an exploration, because those zones are silenced. And from those, they are not completely silenced. From those zones, on the border, there are images, voices, it could be images for the ear, for the vision, for the touch, for the smell, for every body sensations, express something because something has been taped on the body through this silence. I'm going to give you an example later on. One of my patients, so we stayed in those 3 different hospitals. We followed the medical director in 3 different hospitals, the last one being in the suburbs of Paris, during 35 years. Every Monday and every afternoon, we went to there was an outdoor consultation for patients who would go out, and that we would follow out. When this medical doctor resigned, retired. The one who followed was giving meds and meds and meds and meds, so everybody was sleeping. So we decided to leave, and I said to my patient in the hospital, "You come at my home." And that's what they did. And everybody was saying, "Oh, if something happened, you are not a medical doctor." What? No. And I say, "Okay, but now you pay $1 or $2. And when they went better, they would give me a raise." So that's how we could work, because and once a week, always once a week, because we couldn't do more. And we were paid by our, I did not tell you, we were faculty in an institute of social science called, where there were historians, anthropologists, and so on, and people, very famous people. So we persuaded our boss in sociology that we were making a research on madness and the social link. And that was true, because the researchers were the patients with us. They were the PI of the research. And I don't say that to be nice to them, because they can be very nasty at times. I don't want to be so... but they forced us to explore zones, catastrophic zones, in our history too, not only in history, but in our history. I come to that now. One of my first patients in private practice was sent, well, that's like that. I was starting afterward a private practice. And a woman came for her brother. Her brother was catatonic and stayed at home on a bed, and she didn't want him to be hospitalized. And you say what I said, and I thought, you are completely mad. I said, tell him to come. He couldn't move, and I said, tell him to come. And I waited for him, and then I say, oh, I should have said, you come with him, you bring him with a taxi, you take care of him. No, I just say he can come. And that's what he did. Perhaps 6 months after. He came in a shuffling, you say shuffling, like an invalid, And very quickly, his name, I have to turn it down, could be Augustus. That's an emperor in Rome, okay? So he started to be delusional in Rome when they were in a trip, and he he was the emperor, and so on and so on. And he went to that very avant-garde anti-psychiatric Lacanian clinic, Laborde, and his psychoanalyst gave him electroshocks. So just before he received that, he escaped and stayed at home catatonic. And he escaped at home, he crossed a bridge on the Seine, he put out all his clothes, threw them in the Seine with his identity, how you call that? Yes, papers. The police took him, but they brought him in the hospital, and her sister retrieved him and kept him at home. That's how I saw him. The first thing he said to me, that researcher, a very great researcher, my madness occurs at the crossroad of the big history and the little history of my family. That was boom. I repeat it very often, like if I invented it, but it's not my sentence. I had no clue of what had happened. But we worked together. He was very regular. I don't remember very well, but we talked together a lot, regularly. One day, I tell you, things happen when there is an interference between the story of the analyst and the patient. The big history occurred in an interference with my history. One day, he said to me, you are really, in French, it's an onomatopoeia, nyan, nyan. That means you are really like that. How you say, lackadaisical? No. How? That means that? Yeah, like that. And I was very upset because I felt full of energy and I was not like that. So I told him, no, I am okay. He said, okay, I stopped coming to see you. Thank you very much. You were very good, very helpful, but I can't go on. I say, usually, it happens always at some point that they want to leave because I made a blunder, always. So I always say, come once more so I can think about it. He had left the door, then I thought, my goodness. That day, I was waiting for exams, des examens médicaux, medical exams, you say, medical reports, to tell me if I had cancer or not. So he saw that. He had seen that, because he had seen it. And of course I was nyan. Of course I was completely blue. So I was just want to make a parenthesis. Yesterday we heard about the madness as a disease and the lack of this, the lack of that. The assess are always negative. That's true. You are abulic, the privative A in Greek that gives you the lack of this and the lack of that. But no positive assess are claimed. But in consequence of these lacks, there is a development of plus in some other plus intuition when you are not narcissistic, when there is no mirror. That was the case of this man. He had no mirror image. Well, you see, you are like a scanner. You see everything like a radar. You go through you perceive through the mirror, beyond the looking glass. You also have a very acute sense of the present time, which is the present of survival. The present time, here and now, is always essential. If that guy, I would say, oh, when you were a kid, this happened, and therefore, he would say, I know, but that's no importance, because only the present time counts. We are in those catastrophes, zones of catastrophes that we ignore, but we are there, we are exploring them in a place where time does not pass, because time needs symbols, before and after, and my watch, and symbol. When the symbolic, when there is no speech, when the symbolic link, the chains, I can talk to you because I trust you, you trust me, I can lie to you, I can tell you tales, but there's something holds. When this is broken, well, there is no chain of symbols and time does not flow. So this man was able to register what's happening here now with a great intensity, like a scientist. That's why I say they are researchers. So the next day, well, the Monday, that was a Friday, the Monday, I told him, you were right, you observed something that was right. I disclosed what he had seen. I couldn't do less in order to pay honor to his intelligence. Because I think the worst in the treatment, how could I say, not only you are mad, but you are dumb, okay? And not only you lose your mind, therefore you are dumb, and you are shame, and people laugh at you like we saw yesterday in the picture. Rire, rire, rire. I could read that. Instead, there is a lot of skills which are deployed at the condition that the therapist, acknowledges it. For instance, that intuition. The other, in the zones of catastrophes, there is no other. So the loneliness, even if the parents, like you said this morning, are wonderful, you are wonderful families, but on that point of catastrophe, there is no otherness. I will explain after what kind of other. It's something where trust has fallen. That's why it's so difficult to relate. At the same time, the patient trusts me. At the same time, not at all, because there is no other. The other has to be built. Veterans, I'm sorry, I will speak about the war because I was born in it. Veterans always speak about that the loneliness on the battlefield, and there is the chum, the body, and the body is dead, and then the ghost of the body is inside you, and you know, that kind of stuff. So there is no otherness, and the other has to be built from scratch. And the other has to be built from scratch from experiments that those patients do on you. You are the guinea pig. Okay. Well, I joke a little. But you are the one who will be tested over and over. Are you going to stand up as an otherness? And as Freud taught us with the Fortenda game, in order to build some agency, you have to destroy it, build it again, destroy it like the kids do with their games. They build the castle, they destroy the castle, and so on. So it will take a long time. At that time, now I come back to my patient, he could disclose something. Well, not disclose, he could reach something in his history which was cut out. That's another word we used to, we use, Jean-Marc and I, instead of dissociative. Dissociate is a good term, but it is very psychiatric. We prefer cut out, or it's like, yeah, a big cut, a wound. A wound. Trauma is a wound in Greek, a wound in the otherness, and a wound in the unconscious, because this is not repressed. There are no language to, so it's something cut out. So he told me, oh, when I saw you in that Nyan state, my mother, who died of cancer when he was perhaps 12, was like that. He could figure out my condition because he had registered it in a young age, perhaps 8, he was 8. And he had always told me, I have no problem in my infancy. I was in a very loving house. There are no trauma, no history. We were loving people and so on and so on. But the mother died in that loving atmosphere that he couldn't even think he was sad. Okay, But he saw on me the first signs of the illness, or something he could. And he said to me that he was ashamed of his mother. He could have never confessed that. When she was taking him at school and she was so shuffling, he was ashamed. Now came another story that I did not expect, the big history. We were after the war. And I did not expect. His family were in a business of fur. Fur? Fur? They were not Jewish. And since the First World War, they had always been in commercial relationship with Germany. And they did not cease during the war. You see the consequence? Probably they inherited from the Jewish business, which were in concentration camp in Paris. But what I instinctively felt, because I was born in 1943, and I remember very well the aftermath of the war, everybody was suspicious of everybody. And there were people who were ashamed because they had been collaborationists, some others who very quickly raised and invented another story. It was a very, very troubled period for who is who. And probably his family had been shamed. And so they had retired or retracted in that bubble of coziness, love in between them. But the big history was there, which could not be said. And that he said at that moment. This man went out, well, after, not now, went out of psychosis. He was researching. So, did you get it? The big history. The big history is always, now I listen to him, that is a theorem. You have the little history of abuse, of what happened to kids, and there is also the big picture with it, which is usually not addressed at all, because it is, it's not a secret so much. Then don't look back to the past. Erase the past, and it is really an erasure. I give you another example. I prefer to tell stories so that you can. So, at first, the patient will speak to you when they when they have clues of who you are. As I told you, who are you, so that I can speak. In the mental hospital, when I was coming with my husband on the car, somebody could ask me, "Oh, you had a fight with your husband." And at first I was the psychoanalyst. I don't answer, I stay neutral. And very soon after I say, "Oh yes, how did you guess?" Of course there were a lot of fights in the family of this woman, and she could see that. Now, I give you another story. This patient was a very nice person. We never had conflict except that moment. Another, I'm going to you, was very violent. Very violent. He was sent to me against in private practice by a psychoanalyst who was fed up with him. And I was young, and he sent me the baby. This man knew all the theory of the previous analyst, who was Lacanian. He could tell me about all the theories. And for him, psychoanalysis was no use. It was a failure. And he did not want to pay me, because he had given a lot of money to the previous one. And I say, okay, you pay me if you are better. Again, I had my salary, so I don't mind. I tell you now, this man was aggressive. He wanted to suicide. No, and he would call back. Okay. One day he said, you know, this is a failure. You are a failure. And I answered, you know, there is something you succeed very well, is to make your analysis fail. That's your big success. And it started to turn. You know, that's also is a very interesting procedure of those researchers, is to fool you from your binary thought. Like the Zen masters. They put you in trouble with aporia, we use aporia, logical impasse, and quickly, get out of it. Like, okay, I always found that. After that, one day he was still violent. He slammed the door and said, I'm going to kill myself. And I say, okay, do it, please. But you know, you won't be here to see how bad I am. You won't see how, you know, the success of your enterprise. And probably I told him, you should, if you cannot talk, draw something. He came back with a drawing. A drawing of a grid, like Bion. It was not Bion's grid, but it was a grid, exactly. With some squares inside the grid with little drawings. So his main symptom, he could have been catalogued by his previous analyst as borderline and voyeur. Voyeur, you say? Because he was a student in medicine, and since now 2 years, he spent his whole days in his room watching the the building in front, women undressing themselves in the building in front. And that was his only, and so he knew everything about Lacan explanation of perversion, voyeurism, the phallus, the not phallus, and so on. And so he gave me this drawing, and I did not know what to do with it. And he said, you know Françoise Dolto, a very, very famous child analyst in France, who knows to tell about the drawings and so on. He said, you are not Françoise Dolto again. You are really a failure. And I just say one thing. So what is it? He said, of course it's the building in front, and the square are the windows, and the little drawing are the women undressing themselves. And I said, oh, they don't look very erotic, they look rather tortured. Why did I say that? It came like that to say something. He slammed the door again, and I took the drawing and put that in the garbage, he said. I have to tell you just now that this cutout, unconscious or whatever, real thing, you know, we cannot be processed in language, come only in images. You retrieve them from the garbage. History, those parts of history are retrieved from the garbage. So, when he was away, automatically I counted the number of square to do something, you know. 7. Now I can say, during a long time, I say 9 so that people don't recognize. Okay, never mind. 7. When he came back, I say, look, there are 7 cases. Case, you say? Case, case, in French. 7 squares. Okay? In French, 7 cases. 7 cases. You understand case? Case is square. Is a square in the grid. And then he became somebody else. And he said, 7 casas is the village from where my grandmother emigrated in Spain during the Civil War. And she left a dead child. And I supposed that so I told him, I see, the women you are watching are tortured women, because there were a lot of torture at that time. How could I say that? From what? From the, it looks a little crazy. I said that from something that my patient helped me to understand, not my analysis. I was an embryo in the belly of my mother when she was in prison by the Germans, and the cell where she was, it was a crowded cell, was next to the torture chamber. So, and the cells every night could be exterminated or massacred if the resistance had taken action that night. Okay? So I give a great, but after a while, again, it's the research of those patients who made me understand that. It was not my own analysis at all. I give some emphasis on the knowledge of the embryo, the knowledge of the baby. Because when you are a baby, of course you know much, you have much more neurons than we have, so you are much smarter, and you tape record a lot of things that will be filtered afterward, and will be repressed, will be, you know. So that is probably where came my tortured women. My mother never spoke about it. When my father, who escaped 5 times the Nazi, he was in the resistance, he was a specialist of evasion, made her go out. But when she went out, she had that big belly, me. She was, and all her hair became white in one night. And she never spoke about it, never. And for me, that was normal. Your mother went to prison during the war, like the White Cross. It's normal. It's not a big deal. Only after her death, because she was not very nice, I can tell. She was tough, cruel at times, very, I don't say, not easy to handle, me neither. I was not easy to handle. But only after her death, in 2003, I thought, oh, now I know how I could talk to her. Because my patient had made me progress on the topic of trauma. Okay, so that's to tell you, and I will finish now, that's to tell you how the big history is very often relinquished, abandoned in the garbage for us to build the future. But it is our richness, even if it's a catastrophic history. It's a once we put it into a narrative, it is a strength, whatever color it has. If we are cut out of that, we are impoverished. And those patients, and that will be my conclusion, have a knowledge of those areas in their families. From how is it transmitted? It's easy, like baby take things. For instance, I can say my mother, her eyes sometimes would become stone. And after she smiled and everything was all right. Or you can say avoidance. We are speaking about somebody and suddenly the conversation shifts. And just, I will give you a last example. I was telling that to some people elsewhere in America, and an analyst who was in the audience came to see me and said that her mother had died, who was like mine, a little difficult, had died, and after her death, she ignored that there were a lot of letters in her cupboard, and she received the letters to read. And of course she thought, oh, there is some secret I am going to learn. Not at all. There was no secret. Everything was known, but what was not known was the intensity of the love between this mother that was visible in the letters and her brother, who fought during Second World War and died in Japan, almost the last day of the war. And I asked this, and this mother had been disturbed all her life by this ghost that her children didn't know about. Only there was an uncle who died in, okay, that's all, banal, like my story. But they did not know how this ghost had intruded the life. So I told this lady, well, if I were you, I'm not, but I would look in the archives how he died, so that he can rest in peace. Thank you.